Welcome to the Marketing Remix, presented by Red Door Interactive. I'm Reed Carr, CEO of Red Door Interactive. Our show is the senior level marketer's resource for navigating our ever-evolving landscape. In each episode, in about 20 minutes, experts from different marketing disciplines representing different buyer touchpoints tackle one important marketing topic. Then, what do you need to know, and how does it affect the buyer? Welcome to this edition of the Marketing Remix. We're going to be talking about building an enterprise website. In today's marketing landscape, a website is essentially the hub of your brand. Ensuring site users have a positive experience with your website and consequently your brand is more important than ever before. However, building or redesigning an enterprise website can result in a considerable drain on time, money, and resources, making it imperative that an efficient plan be in place and all careful considerations taken into account. In this episode, we'll break down what it takes to build an enterprise website from planning to execution and how to keep the entire project on track and within budget. So we're joined today by our Senior Director of Project Management, Candace Wyatt, and our Senior Director of Marketing Technology, Ron Hadler. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Oh, great to be here, Reed.
Yeah, thanks, Reed.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing we really want to talk about is kind of level set. What is an enterprise website versus just a website? Ron, tell us a little bit.
Yeah, website is really kind of a step up from just having a website. And an enterprise website should also really be kind of your center of your marketing, should be your digital marketing hub. And everything should kind of flow from there. And enterprise is also about complexity and well-designed. So it's really, kind of just a step up versus just having a presence on the web. It's actually doing things, capturing leads, producing sales. So definitely a step up from just having a website.
Yeah. I like to think of the site as it's Rome. All roads lead to and from Rome, right? So everything that you're doing, it's a hub. It's a hub of commerce. The way you're going to interact with your customers and that kind of thing. So, once how does somebody determine that that's the level that they need? Enterprise versus, hey, I just need a WordPress site.
Sure. Complexity really is kind of what really is going to get there. If you have a website that can be displayed in a page, probably don't need enterprise sort of tools to be able to do that. If you have many users who need to be able to update content, you need to segment those folks so they can only access certain parts of the website. Enterprise really kind of gives you that tool, gives you the workflow. If you need multiple people to approve it, if you need compliance, whether that's PCI, for credit cards, or you need WCAG for accessibility, all of those items will, be served by having an enterprise planning and website.
So
tools.
If there's acronyms involved, it means enterprise, like WCAG and PCI and all those things. Talk about complexity. But I mean, the other part of it too, has to revolve around then the brand and what brand you want to be. And I think that having that kind of frictionless experience, it has something that'll resonate with your consumers.
Frictionless is a really good word because kind of the main objective in a content management system is being able to have content creators publish content without IT. That's frictionless publishing. So if you can't achieve that, and a lot of times that's the problem with things that aren't enterprise content management systems or websites, is that they have both content, styling, and layout mixed all in one. When that happens is when you need IT involvement. And then all of a sudden now you're on IT's time, not on marketing's time.
Yeah, a lot of different hands. So speaking of having a lot of different hands in all of this, Candace, talk about, obviously this is going to starts to get complicated at some point. What are some of the more difficult parts of a website redesign?
Yeah, really the content is the most challenging. Understanding the content, not only what content you have, but what content do you need to reach your consumers, as well as planning for how does that content get from where it is today in your website into your new website. There's migration planning. There's content development. Very rarely do we see a new website be built or redesigned without some level of content development needed. So that's really one of the more difficult pieces.
So how do you determine what content is going to be needed when you're looking at you got some of the old stuff, legacy things that you're going to want to bring over, but you got new stuff now you're talking about. What are how are we determining what's going to be needed?
Yeah, one of the ways in which to determine that is really at the needs assessment. One of the first things you do in a website project is what we call an SEO content audit and gap analysis. So what we're doing is looking at the current content that you have, placing a value metric on every single piece of content. How many visits is it getting? How many social shares? How many backlinks are there? And really evaluating what is the high value content that we have to maintain and make sure that we bring over into the new website.
So
And then,
wait a minute. So wait, this is a website. I heard SEO, I heard social. What's that all about? I thought we were just building a website.
well, like Ron was saying, it really is the hub of everything. It is where your consumers are sometimes experiencing your brand for the very first time.
Yep.
Sometimes it is where they're coming to re-experience your brand, and it's where they're learning more about your products and services. So all of these different channels are really directing traffic to ultimately your website.
Right. Yeah, and that's where you're talking about then the value of all those things. So assessing the value and mapping that against then all the consumer touch points that you have. What's that process for determining all the different touch points a consumer has of that website? And I say consumer, by the way, broadly, obviously buyer, B2B, this applies across B2B, B2C, whatever it may be. But so how are you mapping those against the consumer touch points and how that reflects and shows up on the website?
Yeah, I think one of the first things you have to do is really understand the marketing program and how are your consumers coming to your website? What does paid media look like? What does social media look like? What does your email program look like? I think that's the first point, is understanding all those touch points and how people are ultimately arriving at your site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, going back to content is still king.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about the engagements as being king now over content, but without good content, you don't get those engagements. So still going back to content and having the website as that content hub allows you to serve your users or clients or customers wherever they may be, whether that's on a mobile phone, watch, classes, or over voice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's broaden the concept of content too. I think a lot of people do think of it as the text, but we're talking images. Now we're talking about adapting to this world of voice. Not to say, and then mobile and how it displays that way. I mean, the platforms by which people are interacting with these sites has changed. And that being said, people are concerned. The way I interpret it, so many people are concerned about the pace of change. Like, oh my gosh, this just happened. How are we staying on top of that, on what the changes are going to be, such that when you're building a site, because one of the other questions we're going to talk about is how often do you need to redesign a site or something like that? I mean, it's not like these changes, despite happening so frequently, are happening out of nowhere. So how do we stay on top of this?
Well, it comes back to getting things that are well designed, right? And right now, the new thing is voice, and it's coming at us, fairly quickly. But it's been coming at us for now 3 years,
Right.
And so it's a slow-moving train, but it's here and it's arriving, and people are, a little bit kind of thinking about that. But having a well-designed site that serves up content in many different contexts allows you to roll with what's going on. It allows you to make sure that you are future-proof. So having your content, well-structured so that it is just content. I can serve it on a watch. I can serve it over voice. I can make it meet almost any of those devices by just having it well-structured.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then Candace talking about then well-structured, I mean, well-structured content and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how are you helping clients or those who are building the site? How are you keeping them all on the same page for all the different versions of content that people are going to need?
Yeah, it really starts with how you plan and approach websites. For clients, you really should have a plan. We at Red Door, anytime we're going through a website, we know that there are steps that you need to take in order to make sure that content is successfully migrated from one site to another,
Right.
that you're maintaining that value with things like SEO, 301 redirects. So really a process is needed,
Right.
knowing those steps, and then ultimately going through those during the project.
Well-structured content is also a combination of good content strategy,
Mm-hmm.
what the voice is, what is the content that we need to be having in our website, but also content engineering. and that's the applying engineering principles to content, and having a content model, understanding what the content type definitions, those are all the attributes for your content, understanding how those things are related, and having a vocabulary, a taxonomy that relates your content. That allows you to have things like related content and dynamic content, which allows for easy population of your website. I enter in one piece of content and it just automagically populates everywhere on the website.
Yep.
Or the devices.
Yeah. And so now let's kind of flip this a little bit as the Rosetta Stone that you are on to the marketer side of this. What you're talking about there is maybe kind of the technical view out to the site, but now so the consumer view of that, what's the consumer's version of what they're experiencing when you're talking about content engineering?
Well, you're talking about a website that's very easily consumable. I get design patterns in the way that I look at stuff. So if I see your product displayed in one format on one way in the website, I see it consistently there. I don't need to learn new design patterns, and my content is designed that it fits those patterns. So I don't have 3 different ways that are a summary of my product,
right,
and I have to have 3 different entries in the back end. So the consumer sees something that's consistent, they easily recognize, so pattern recognition comes into effect, and they're consuming their website at their easy level, not learning something each and every time they go to a new page that displays your product.
Yeah, and another way, Ron, is with consumers experiencing dynamic and related content. That is all possible because of content engineering and having a well thought out, what is essentially a blueprint for how you're going to engineer your content so that consumers can ultimately not just arrive at one blog post and it's a dead end, but they can see related content, they can see related products, related services, all of those.
Yeah. So actually, this is a good way to segue then into a bit of choosing a content management system, because something like that's just not out of the box on a WordPress site or something to that effect. I mean, so how all these things, content engineering, taking into consideration SEO and some of those components, but then related content and consumer, the way people are going to use it. How do we choose the content management system that's going to be right for a client?
Generally want to, lead folks through a, content management selection process. So an understanding, first thing is the requirements needed for your website. And those are things that range from the type of content, the different audiences, the different places the audiences are going to consume that content from, your infrastructure, are the folks who are going to maintain this? Are they open source folks? Are they .NET folks? Are they Java folks? So understanding all of those requirements. And once you understand those requirements and have a good understanding of those and written them down, discuss them, approve them, then you can kind of take and go through, get multiple demos of different content management systems. So they are going through the demo based upon the requirements, because if you just go out and do a demo with a vendor, they're going to give you the happy path.
Right.
They're going to just show you what is the bright spots.
Well, and I always say with the vendors, the answer to any question is yes, right? Right. Does it do this? Well, of course it does. Now, what's behind that is you have to do X and Y and Z, and the perfect circumstances have to occur for it to happen that way, which I think then speaks a little bit to then the risk of over-engineering some of this stuff. I mean, how do you balance that to make sure you're doing just what you need and not overdoing it so it's so difficult to maintain?
Out-of-the-box features and functionality is really in having good solid building blocks for, a website that offers a framework to allow you to build things using components, not just all a bunch of custom coding, because the custom coding is where the weakest spots are,
right,
because that's really what needs to be maintained and brought up to specs anytime there's changes and things like that. But if you're using out-of-the-box functionality or just configuration over coding, that's really how you kind of achieve that.
Yeah. And you're talking about frameworks and patterns and things like that. Candace, what would you say then? Because I feel like that's talking a little bit about then the planning process. We're back to planning a bit. So what do you feel like are the most significant elements of technical planning?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, as Ron's already touched on, is you have the content engineering aspect. And it's really before you put pen to paper is spending that time up front, really developing what that plan is. Because ultimately the rest of it is a lot simpler. You're just executing on that plan. The other thing that for technical planning that is important is when you do get to the development phase, is making sure that there is alignment on how you're going to implement things. Things like CSS guidelines. You have multiple developers. A website is not built with one person, especially when we're talking about enterprise content management systems. You typically have a team of 5 to 10 developers who are working. And each of those 5 to 10 developers have different experience. They have different standards by which they code for. And so really getting alignment with things like CSS guidelines, making sure that all of the code that is produced within your website is consistent, which makes it scalable, which makes it maintainable, all of those things. So there's definitely the upfront planning that happens at the beginning of the project, but you're always planning at each phase. And so when you're going into that next phase, making sure that there's alignment and planning there.
So you talk about phases. I mean, this is a good time to maybe talk about Agile and what that is and how that applies to the website planning process and different versions that people can take.
Yeah. There's 2 kind of main types of projects. You have your waterfall projects, which is you go through things sequentially. You don't start something else until the thing before it is complete. And then you have Agile, which is really more iterative. Things kind of iterate on each other, flow, and there's no rigid structure that you see with waterfall. For websites, I tend to like the hybrid approach. Where you start planning definitely needs to be structured. You need to make sure that things are documented, that there's alignment. But as you get into development, that's where we start to see more of the Agile framework come in, and you can be a little bit more iterative. And really the value there is, we don't want to go dark for 4 or 5 months, come back with a built website that you're seeing for the first time and going, hey, wait, no, that's not what I expected.
That's not what I meant. Yeah.
So with Agile, you're seeing the progress as you go. You're doing demos of completed work, and you're having those conversations so that you can adjust and make tweaks for any future development.
What would you say are some of the things that people tend to overlook? Because I mean, at a high level, you got project management, you got developers, you got designers. There's a bunch of other people involved. And I feel like people don't necessarily realize that when you're getting into enterprise, QA, project management, what are some of the other things that people tend to not think about that are part of the process that some of our listeners need to go, hey, if we're going to go embark on a process like this, things that they should be asking their developers or who's going to build it, to know that they're going to be able to deliver what they're expecting.
Yeah, I've probably the same answer as Candace.
I hope so. And you guys are well aligned.
And that is well, we've done probably 10 or 12
yeah.
enterprise website redevelopment projects. Yeah. So the thing is really the involvement by the clients and the amount of time it takes for them to do reviews on things, provide feedback. I don't think they really realize the time involvement. Right. And if they don't have the schedule open to go through these projects, and they do last months, then that's really going to be what hits them the hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I would say if you are somebody who's evaluating, different vendors or partners to do your redesign, is not just looking at them as, oh, I'm a development shop, right? I'm a design shop. They really do need to have cross-channel expertise in order to effectively implement a website project. Because again, SEO, social media, paid media, all of these things are so integrated into your website that if they lack the expertise in those channels, you're going to end up with a website that does not perform for those channels.
Yeah. The day they launch is all of a sudden, what happened to my search traffic? That just tanked. And I think some people assume that, that's just what happens. And it doesn't have to be that way, or recognize the landing page component of media, paid media, that your site have landing pages. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think one of the other ones that I know, Candace, maybe you won't say, but I think is often overlooked is the value of project management, because that's what you represent. And to deliver what we deliver over, on and on and on, you hear is, oh my God, we couldn't do this without the strong project manager who is seeing us through this process. Because what you're hearing is so much complexity. You have cross-channel, you've got QA, you've got, technology selection, content engineering, but the one who's the glue, ideally consistently through the whole project, is that project management. So now knowing that that's the case, and I'm giving that back to you, saying that how valuable you are to this process and your team is to this process. What are the key attributes of a project manager that you need to kind of recognize so for someone who can guide someone through this process?
Yeah, project managers really need to know the process of a website project from start to finish so that they need to be planning 10 steps ahead,
Yep.
right? Otherwise, you're already off track. They need to know how these different channels work together because they're ultimately bringing those teams together at the right points to make sure that we're collaborating, to making sure that the decisions we're making are inclusive and the right decisions for all channels.
Yep.
And really risk mitigation, risk planning and mitigation is I think one of the most important aspects of project management when we're talking about these very complex enterprise content management systems, and being able to, one, understand you're going to have challenges in a project of this scale, but being able to effectively plan for how you're going to maneuver those challenges, and doing that before those risks are issues, right? You should have those plans in place beforehand, and a good project manager is going to be able to understand and anticipate where the challenges are going to occur.
Yeah.
I would just inject and say that, there's a lot of important factors in rebuilding a website, but good project management is a make or break factor.
Yeah.
And I'm being on the benefit side of working with Candace and her team and their excellent project management, I understand and seeing other projects who have not been run well and just how much of a mess that they can actually produce or just completely fail.
Right. And that's the thing about sites is that there's typically this big deadline. It's a big reveal. It's because it is Rome. It's the big thing, that the initiative of the year or whatever it may be, and then everything else is going to come off of that. So if you miss that and it starts kind of getting falling behind, it gets pretty high visibility pretty darn fast. So
yeah, the moment you start getting a little bit off track with that schedule, with that budget, is when stress comes in, people maybe working some overtime to try and catch up. And when all of those factors start to happen, that's where things like quality suffers.
Yep.
You start to compromise on some of the process or whatnot that is really, there deliberately to ensure that quality is there at the end.
Yeah. So let's the doom and gloom part of it all. Let's end this on an optimistic this note because we're coming up on time here. But there's a ton of opportunity when you build a site like this. What do you think are the big opportunities for the next level of websites that we're talking about? They're hard, but they're also this platform. It creates a ton of excitement when you launch. What's the hope and promise of the future in website development?
And I've mentioned this a couple times already, but voice applications, voice delivery of content is really what's coming out of that. Whether it's on a watch, the assistant on your phone, or the appliance in your house, and being able to access a brand's content with voice commands is really where a well-structured content hub like a website will actually serve you into the future. And just having that means that any other platform that comes up, that your content is well structured and available, not just through a phone or a laptop, is going to serve you no matter what comes in the future and how we are, whether we're talking to the walls and everything around us in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think distributed content on my mind too, in terms of being able to distribute your content to other sites and other platforms, making it available through commerce via other commerce channels. So
your content doesn't need to be available just for the humans, but it needs to be available for the robots, right? Because machine learning's coming in, they're taking that understanding of what the content is and making decisions based upon that.
Yep. Cool. Well, guys, thanks for joining. Hopefully our audience is a little more educated on what it takes to have an enterprise site and what that really means and how to make good decisions going forward. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pleasure.